Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of Oxnard Live. I'm your host, Daniel Chavez Jr. Tonight, I'm very excited as we continue our conversation with Alfredo Martinez from CBC Federal Credit Union. Tonight, we are going to be talking about tips and strategies in order to promote a healthier, stronger, more better, or lack of better words, financial future for you, your family, and friends, and anyone else that you know. So, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, please join me in welcoming Alfredo Martinez once again back to our show as we continue our conversation. Alfredo, welcome back again, and I look forward to the tips and strategies that you're going to be sharing tonight.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you for having me again. Thank you, Oxnard Live. I really do appreciate the opportunity. I think what we should aim to do today is build off the momentum which we had our previous conversation and really introduce some strategies, some concepts that go in pair with what we spoke about last time. And that's really what I hope to do. So I have prepared some slides and I prepared a deck for tonight. But before that, maybe we should just have a little pre-conversation before that.
Yes, sounds good to me, and I look forward to the slides, and I'm pretty sure our viewers would too. So give us a little snapshot of what we can expect once we start reviewing those slides. What exactly are we going to learn today that kind of gave us a preview from our last conversation?
Great question, Daniel. Building off of the momentum in the conversation, I think it's important to touch on at least three things this evening. And this is what the focus of the presentation will be. We're going to explore the importance of creating and maintaining a budget. I think this is a crucial piece to what we had already spoken about last time around. The second piece to that is examining the differences between wants and needs at a little bit deeper level, looking at it from a budgetary perspective. So we're going to actually look at a budget today and see if we can kind of calculate what that looks like. And lastly, setting goals for spending, saving, and debt repayment. This is a crucial element to building a budget or any type of financial planning. And so, although this may all sound very familiar and almost repetitive to what we did last time we spoke, but we're actually going to dive deep into these some of these conversations and really the concepts behind and how some savvy financial planners are tackling these issues today.
So just to confirm, we're not going to be examining my budget, right, or my finances.
No, we wouldn't want to do that. That brings up a great point, though, Daniel. I think personal finance is such a topic that a lot of folks kind of shy away from.
Mm-hmm.
What I hope to accomplish today is maybe encourage and inspire having this conversation at home. And what we actually have is I actually have a mock persona that we'll be using this evening. So no personal information from you, Daniel.
So let me ask you about that, because you kind of hit the nail on the head. Talking about finances is kind of one of those taboo things. Everybody wants to keep it real close to themselves. They don't want nobody knowing, even like spouses or girlfriends or even their parents. Nobody wants to share their financial standings. Do you know why it's become so taboo that nobody wants to talk about it?
I'll base this my answer on the experiences that I've had, and so in short, I think the reason why it's so taboo and really it really speaks to how we really don't know as much regarding personal finance. I think that this is true with a lot of subjects. We're hesitant to discuss subjects such as politics, finances, economics, when we really don't know exactly maybe the context behind it. And so I understand that as a taboo. And usually one of the ways that we like to address this is really just by sharing and really sharing your personal experiences. And I'm not saying, tell me how much money you make, tell me what your credit score is, but are you having spending issues? So we introduce the conversation and the topic by these kind of larger questions without really pointing into details. And then before you know it, you have attendees really putting themselves in the driver's seat and saying, hey, this actually resonates with me. Can you tell me a little bit more about this concept or this strategy?
Awesome. So I'm ready if you're ready to go ahead and share your screen and let's start diving into these slides. As a reminder to our viewers that Oxnard Live is fully interactive. So if you have a question or something, hit it in the chat box. I'm going to be monitoring the chat box on both social media and on our YouTube channel. So if you have questions, let us know so that we're able to ask Alfredo, since you're automatically getting a free consultation when you kind of think about it. So free resource right now, right here on Oxnard Live. So Alfredo, if you're ready.
I am. Thank you. Daniel, while you listen in, and to any of the audiences in here, please challenge my assumptions I'm making here about financial planning and budgeting. I really think that this is a time to take advantage and be dynamic and have a dynamic conversation. So I encourage all participation, challenge me on anything. Happy to have that conversation. So without further ado, I'm going to share my screen. Bear with me for one moment. Can we see that okay on your end, Daniel?
Yes, I see it.
Fantastic. So once again, my name is Alfredo Martinez, Community and Special Events Coordinator with CBC Federal Credit Union. What we have tonight prepared is simply a Budgeting 101 deck. And so what we have outlined for you are some goals that I briefly spoke Daniel with. So once again, exploring the importance of creating and maintaining a budget. We're going to examine the differences between wants and needs from a budget perspective. And we're really going to set some goals for spending and saving and debt repayment. These are all three elements that I'd like to introduce, at least at a one-on-one type of perspective here. So I really want to start the conversation with setting goals. This is going to sound very familiar to those who tuned in the last time Daniel and I spoke. But what we want to categorize and start thinking is setting our goals in a three-term period, really. We have our short-term goals, our medium-term goals, and our long-term goals. So just to kind of recap, some short-term goals can be accomplished in a few months or up to 2 years, whether that's saving $1,000 in your savings account or saving up for a trip, whatever that may be. These, you want to categorize these as short-term goals that can be accomplished up to 2 years. Moving forward to medium-term goals, this is something that can be accomplished in about 2 to 5 years. So if this is buying a vehicle, taking a family trip, we all have our goals as far as what type of financial activities we want to do. And so the premise of today's conversation is really, how do we align our budget to achieve our goals? The last piece to this is our long-term goals. This is something that can be accomplished in more than 5 years. So whether this is setting up a retirement account for retirement down the road, or if it's buying a home. Right now, a lot of homeowners are desperate to find homes. And so I know this is a hot topic right now. And so if you bear with me today, we're going to go ahead and see how we can kind of achieve that through a budgetary perspective. So going back to our conversation with Daniel and I had between wants and needs, I remember Daniel loved Starbucks. He loves how they taste. And so what I have here is just a basic definition, just to kind of reintroduce the topic if you don't quite remember. So again, let's go with wants first. Something that enhances your life and that you'd like to have, but that you can get away without having. Whereas a need is, these are the essential things that you cannot go any significant period of time without. As you hear me speak this evening, please take this into consideration as we prepare a budget, a mock budget. Think of yourself, hey, are some of my expenses more of wants or needs? And hopefully by the end of today, you walk away with a really solid understanding of these two definitions. So let's start with some basics. What is a budget? It can be an estimate of income and expenses for a set period of time. I like to call it a roadmap or a financial plan. And so really a budget is there to help you and to assist you in facilitating the goals that you have outlined for yourself. So the question is why do we use a budget? Well, it can really help you understand your spending habits. It can help you create a savings plan or pay off debts. I think that this really tells you a lot about yourself and your consumer decisions when you actually have a budget in front of you and you see where your money is going. So one of the questions that I get frequently is, when can you use a budget? Well, it really depends on your need. Budgets can be used regularly to help you maintain good financial practices. They can also be used to help achieve a specific goal. Most folks use budgets on a monthly scale, although I have seen folks do budgets on a weekly scale, which is a little bit more time consuming. It really just depends on how technical you want to be with your money. Again, you have to find out what works best for you and your family unit. And so if that means a monthly scale, then by all means, a monthly scale. So what we have today is this profile, this financial profile. I like to put this in the context of a young person, really because some of these concepts are new to younger folks. So we're going to talk about Marta. Marta is a 22-year-old woman who works two jobs, one on a campus as a student assistant, at another as a hostess at a restaurant. Marta often feels overwhelmed by her larger debt. She's also paid bills late in the past due to how she's attending university and working. We're gonna go through a 5-step plan on how she can better help understand her options, her behaviors, and her solutions. So again, the premise here is to put it in perspective into you, and we're going to be using this persona here to help you do that. So one of the first steps, and I actually have a slide on this, is to getting organized. But before this, for anybody out there listening in now, I want you to take a look at some of these items that I have here. The question is which of these financial documents would Marta need for her budget? So before we jump into the actual strategies and concepts, I want to kind of test your knowledge. You don't have to type in anything, but maybe take a second. I usually like to give 30 seconds to a minute to see some of these items. And so I'll do that now. I'll give about 30 seconds, and then we're going to go ahead and discuss a little bit about some of the financial documents Marta would need. And Daniel, feel free to chime in here. If you see something that you think that should belong in her budget, feel free to give your answer.
Well, I see a few that could potentially be part of the budget, but then I also see a few that could, but then maybe be too much information that may not serve a purpose. I would say obviously you would want to have your loan statements with you, your bills, I would say pay stubs and credit card statements. I'm kind of leaning towards bank statements, but I think that might be maybe not one of those things that they would need. Receipts, you would think, yeah, I want to have a whole record of my Starbucks receipts with me just so that people know. But I don't see the receipts being that. So I think those will be my final answers. The loan statements, what I say, tax returns, not bills, bank, credit card statements, and pay stub.
So I did make it tricky on purpose, really, so we could have a conversation. So the next slide will actually show some of the items that I have here. And let's talk about them, really. Let's understand why I highlighted some of these pieces. You're totally right, Daniel, in saying that some of these items may be helpful, but not totally necessary to create a budget, whereas some other items are actually more needed. So let's just go through some of the ones that I highlighted here. I highlighted loan statements. I believe you said that. I highlighted tax returns, bills, W-2s, credit card statements, and bank statements. So I want to talk a little bit about some of these things. And there's going to be a reason why I highlighted some of these. So for the loan statements, why would we need a loan statement? Well, the loan statement tells us our debts, right? It tells us how much we owe and usually what period of time we have this debt for. This is incredibly important into considering a monthly budget. At minimum, you want to satisfy your minimum monthly payment, but having all your loan statements in front of you may give you the opportunity to say, hey, maybe I can put more towards this specific loan or this payment in any given month. The tax returns. Why did I highlight the tax returns? Well, these are one of these items that may not necessarily be in your normal budget planning session, so say. However, it does provide incredible amounts of information. It has information like your past annual income. And so some of this information can be helpful in determining, how much money you made the year before and what type of expenses you had during that time period. So this is a little bit more for reflection, although it's not necessarily needed for a monthly budget. The bills, I think, is straightforward, right? Our utility bills, our gas, our electricity, these types of items are needed on a monthly basis, so we understand our outgoing costs. Some of these bills are referred to as fixed costs. So these are fixed items in your budget. So you're going to have a water bill, you're going to have an electric bill and utility bill. So these are some of the items that you already know automatically will come out. And usually these types of bills fall under your needs list there. Why did I highlight W-2s? Well, again, it has your annual income, some personal information, as well as employer information. And so this is another item where it's not completely necessarily needed for a monthly budget per se, but again, another point of reflection for yourself. And again, just giving you the opportunity to familiarize yourselves with some financial documents. And then you were totally right about the credit card statements, and I even highlighted the bank statements. The credit card statements, for debt reasons, right? We want to know how much credit card, essentially how much monthly amounts are going to our credit cards. And then the bank statements have all of this information, usually at a monthly scale. It tells us all of our debits, all of our credits. So again, giving you the key sources of information needed, so that way you have it to build your budget. So if you see other items on here, such as tax estimates, pay stubs, of course, you could include these in your financial planning as well. But usually you can find your gross income in one or the other, as in a bank statement, as an example, if you get your direct deposit as an example. So you may challenge me on some of these things. They're not all necessarily needed. But again, I wanted to provide that larger context here as to why you may want to consider at least familiarizing yourselves with some of these financial documents.
Alfredo, let me ask you about that,
Sure.
because obviously one of my answers I think I selected for was pay stubs. And, as we know, every 2 weeks, some people get paid, some get paid on a monthly basis, some get paid weekly. And it always varies because sometimes they may put extra hours in on certain days. So they may get a larger check than they would the following or the previous pay period. Why wouldn't that be part of that monthly budgeting? Is it because it's not considered stable income and that it varies?
No, not necessarily, Daniel. And great question. Pay stubs can absolutely be a part of your monthly financial planning. The reasons why I didn't highlight pay stub is because I feel like you could find this information on your bank statement. What we have seen as a financial institution, and I'm going to make an assumption here, is saying that most folks have direct deposit. That happens to be the case at our financial institution. I'm not sure if that's true and at other locations, but the thing is that electronic pay stubs are usually the new method. So if you did want to get your pay stub, you can jump onto your computer, go through your HR profile, and download that pay stub. Most employers have gone paperless, and so that's the reason why I didn't highlight pay stubs. But you can absolutely include that into your monthly financial planning.
Okay. Yeah, I know for my employer, we have the paper list and I can pull it up on my phone in seconds how quickly it is.
Exactly. So what we see now, as far as the financial institutions, paperless is the new option. It's more cost effective for financial institutions, and it's usually more convenient for the employees. So to Daniel's point, pay stubs are a great piece of information that you can have in your as far as financial planning goes. But at the same time, bank statements usually have that information if you have direct deposit. So the idea here really is to organize yourselves in meaningful ways. If you prefer your pay stubs, by all means, I think there's a great amount of information on there, such as your gross income, your net income, the deductions that are coming out of your pay stubs. These are all great pieces of information, which is another reason why I didn't quite highlight it, is that I'm not sure if I don't want to make any assumptions that people quite understand some of these topics, their gross versus their net, the deductions that are taking place, especially for young folks. And again, this is in the context of a younger person kind of understanding some of these concepts.
Can you go over that real quick? Because I know for my brothers, they're younger than me, and trying to explain gross versus net and what they actually take home and what does that mean. And can you just briefly touch on that before moving on to the next slide, the difference between that and, any additional information around that?
Absolutely, Daniel. So whether it's an electronic pay stub or a physical pay stub, each pay stub essentially for that given pay period, if you're getting paid biweekly or monthly, whatever cadence you're getting paid, illustrates several figures. You start off with your gross income. So what gross income really means is that this is the income that you made without any deductions, taxes, SSI. And so essentially what you billed for that pay period for your hourly rate or salary. What then you'll see is several deductions, whether it's SSI or any other types of commitments that are attached to you. And so these deductions usually decrease your gross income, and then you have your what we often call your take home, which is referred to as your net income. So the net income is what you actually have deposited into your account or check in hand. And this is after the taxes, this is after the SSI, any other deductions that you may have towards your that given pay period, whether it's a 401k deferment as an example. And so really it's your take home. And so what ends up happening for a lot of young folks, and actually happened to me when I was quite younger, I was quite excited to get my first check. And I saw my gross income and I was excited about that. And then I had a conversation with my family and they said, "Hey, Alfredo, that's not really that's not really what you made. That's your gross." After deductions, I saw the net income figure and I was just, it was a little shot to the gut, not gonna lie. But these are some of the experiences that a lot of young folk have when it comes to entering the workforce. So don't be discouraged. Your income will increase over time. And so just the key difference there is, again, the take home versus what you build for, if that makes sense.
I appreciate that. I know I felt the exact same thing for my very first job working at Target, thinking, oh, yes, I'm putting all these hours, I'm calculating and I'm doing calculus in my mind, and I've never taken calculus to really figure it out how much I was actually going to take home. And once I actually got the check, it was not what I was expecting, but great information. Thank you.
Of course, of course. Yeah, I totally relate to that. That's funny. So let's get into the meat of it. What are some steps you can start doing today to start building a budget? What I like to do and I'd like to provide for you are these simple 5 steps. Of course, with each step does come some planning, some organization, and it does take a little bit of time on your end. But what I'd like to highlight here is how you can kind of make it easier for yourself. So let's just go through some of these. So let's just go through step number 1, and then we'll go there on out. Getting organized, locating and organizing your financial documents. Daniel and I were briefly speaking about pay stubs a little bit earlier ago. If you happen to get them electronically, do you have access to them? If so, do you know the password, or is it easy? Essentially, is it easy enough as it is easy for Daniel to pull up his phone and look at his pay stubs, his financial information? If this is something that's not easy for you, that's where you start. You start by making it easy for yourself and understanding where you can find this information. So whether that's with your employer, whether that's at home. And then the second piece of this is organizing these financial documents. You know, some folks still get physical pay stubs. Are you just simply throwing them away? Are you storing them? Are you securely storing them? Are you securely shredding them? Again, a lot of this information has private identifiable information. In today's world, it's just best practice to securely shred these items or securely store them, however that works for you. So really step number 1 is about identifying where you can find your information and then organizing your financial documents. Moving on to step number 2, we have to understand how much income we have. So how much money is earned after each month from taxes from a paycheck, kind of going based on the conversation we just had. So that means Social Security or any other means. So some folks are in the position where you have more than one revenue stream. You may have your full-time job. You may be getting SSI. You may be a recipient of a grant. You may be having other revenues essentially. So what you need to do is understand how much money is coming in, and preferably your net income as opposed to gross. The net income is really going to be helpful in understanding where to begin your budget. Moving on to step number 3, listing expenses. How much money is spent each month and on what? And so one way to do this is going back to the required financial documents. As an example, your bank statements. You have a general idea of the expenses you have going out, such as utilities, as I had mentioned earlier. Some of your other categories, such as your wants, that's where it's a little bit more flexible and you'll find more variability there. And so how do you start getting organized and listing your expenses? Again, if you remember on our last conversation, I mentioned grabbing your bank statement, grabbing a few highlighters and highlighting your expenses on your bank statement. This will give you that immediate visual and to understand how much money is really going out. And that's just the first step. After that, you can start kind of categorizing your needs and wants and different types. And so that way you have a better understanding. But first and foremost, listing your expenses is really important. The step number 4 here is listing savings. So how much money is set aside for savings? This topic right here, step number 4, depending on where you are in your financial life, a lot of folks may not be in a position to save. If you're not in a position to save a quantity that you think is what you would like to, I think that the habit of saving is just as important. Whether you can save $1, $5, $10, $20 for any pay period, try to incorporate this habit into your daily expenses. The reason being is that your income will grow over time as you pursue greater careers or education. And the idea is that if you have this habit set early on, in this case for Marta, 22-year-old university student who has full-time university and a job, time is of the essence, and organizing yourself is of the utmost importance. And so whether she can save $1, $5, the key thing there is really just understanding how much you can save. So if you are in a position, list your savings. And then step number 5, we want to list our debt. So how much money is owed to creditors? Do we have credit cards, auto loans, a home mortgage, whatever the case may be? We have to know on a monthly basis how much money is going out. You can go ahead and work with your monthly minimum payment at this point. That's where you want to start. I would suggest that you start there with your monthly minimum payment. That way you can have a true understanding of what your minimum requirements are to satisfy your obligations. And so at the end of this, you'll have the opportunity to say, hey, maybe I can actually put a little bit more in this category or more in this area. But at minimum, we just want to provide that basis for you. So at a very high level, these are the 5 steps you can start taking today to build your budget. What we're going to do now is kind of take a little step further and showcase a budget as well. Marta as an example. Before we do that, I want to introduce a couple terms and formulas here. Again, some of these formulas are just to help guide your understanding of budgets. And so what we want to understand is what disposable income means. And so disposable income in the simplest form is income minus needs. So the idea here is that you take your remember when we spoke about gross income and your net income? And so the income that essentially after the deductions from your pay period, you want to take that figure and you want to subtract that minus your needs. So again, remember your needs are essentially items like your utility bills, your transportation, your health insurance, your rent. So these are all items that we know that come out on a monthly basis, and we want to subtract that. We're going to call that, for the sake of this conversation, disposable income. What does disposable income really mean? Well, this just really means is that after you take care of your utmost necessary items, you have this figure left. This income can be disposable to use in other areas, whether you choose to pay back your debts, whether you choose to put this all towards your wants or all towards your savings. It's really your choice. Again, that's why we kind of label this disposable income. The reason why you see net income down here is because this is my definition of net income. After we take care of our needs and our debts, I like to call that the net income. The reason being is that you've been responsible enough to take care of your bills, the items that you actually need, and your debts. So as you see right below, the DI stands for disposable income. We take that figure, we subtract that towards the creditors that we owe. And again, remember, use your monthly minimum payment. So if you happen to have 2 credit cards and an auto loan, just add up the minimum requirement to satisfy those payments, and that's your debt category. So I call this net income because we've already taken care of our needs and we've already taken care of our debts. And this net income can really be used how you see fit. So the next item that we have here is our adjusted net income. So we're going to take savings into consideration now. Do we have the opportunity to save? And if so, we take our net income minus whatever projected amount we want to save, and we're going to call that our adjusted net income. So again, these are just some of the definitions that we have out there. You're going to see a variety of this, different places, different types of budgetary planning firms. And then so moving forward, net income minus savings minus your wants. So this is a Starbucks. This is any other items that enhance your life but not necessarily needed to do your daily operations. And we're going to, after this, if you're positive, this is what we're going to call potential profit. And this is somewhere you want to be at the end of the month. You either want to break even or you want to have a profit. And so what happens if you find yourself in a position where you do have a profit? where you actually have extra money that you didn't anticipate, or for whatever reason you may have gotten a raise or a bonus, whatever the case may be, you have more money to do different activities with. This is a challenging part for a lot of folks, is what we often have more money, when we go through careers and we make more money, there's this term that we call lifestyle creep that I really want to touch base on. Lifestyle creep really speaks to the individuals who are or making more money, whether through a better career, higher education, whatever the case may be. We often think that our income has to match our lifestyle. And so what a lot of folks actually do is they actually start buying the latest car, or they think that because they make more money, they have to participate in some of these more luxury types of services or items. That can be very dangerous over a long period of time. The reason being is that you're making it more difficult for yourself to save. So this really kind of goes back to the whole saving concept. If you can save $1, whatever your financial position you're in, if you can save, something that's agreeable to your budget, you're putting yourself in a better mindset and setting this habit so you don't fall victim to a lifestyle creep per se.
Alfredo, I got a question because there's a lot of people that believe, and if you're going to touch on it, just let me know. If you have multiple credit cards and you have your auto loans, and then say you get this large sum of money or you have extra money, everybody believes that you should just focus on one and give more to one, and you pay the minimum for everything else. And then there's others that believe, well, if I have extra money, I'll give more than the minimum to all of them. What is the right approach? And again, if you're going to cover it later on, then we'll hold off. But if not, if you can just share.
I love the question, Daniel. I will be speaking on that matter a little bit later, but you're absolutely right. This is a hot topic. What strategy should we use? What I'll introduce a little bit later in the presentation is not necessarily, they're just best practices. I'm gonna introduce two widely accepted debt repayment strategies that that people argue about. And so what I'll do is I'll provide the facts, I'll provide some of the cons, and then I'll let the viewers decide what best works for them.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Of course. So what we have here now is a mock budget for Marta. So remember, Marta is a full-time student and she has a job as a hostess at a restaurant. And so what I really want to demonstrate here is some of the conversations that she's going to be having with herself, while also kind of highlighting some of the areas that we spoke about last time, the differences between needs and wants, the debts, the savings, etc. So let's briefly start with Marta's monthly income. We have Marta's monthly income at a $2,000 figure. I kept it nice and even so we can understand this concept a little bit better. So how do we start understanding our total expenses? Again, kind of going back to some of the formulas, I say that total expenses are really your needs and your debts, because your wants and your savings are more, not that they're not necessary, but they're more flexible as far as if we can actually engage in these types of activities. And again, talking about disposable income, we have income minus needs, which is of the utmost importance. We have to take care of our needs. And so the wants and the debts and the savings contributions are really secondary, in my opinion, to this. So what I briefly did here is I highlighted some items. So I highlighted Marta's current monthly spending. I have some of her needs. So you see here that some of the items are such as rent, groceries, utilities, car payment, and car insurance. So remember back to our conversation here. These are items that we cannot go a long time without. We need to operate our daily functions. So what you'll see is here's a very limited budget. Obviously, we probably have a lot more needs than this. And some of you who are tuning in might say, hey, where do you find rent for $600? I know that we live in an area where rent and affordable housing is such a hot topic right now. But for the sake of this webinar and this education, we've kept it to simple numbers here. Same thing with wants. What are some of Marta's wants? She has a very modest want list here. She has her coffees at $20 a month. Daniel's probably thinking, where can you find coffee for $20 a month?
Well,
a restaurant?
Well, when I think about it, Starbucks, $20 a month, that's only going to give me 2 days. So what am I supposed to do for the rest of the time?
Right, exactly. So if for the sake of this conversation here, Marta is a high school student, a college graduate, so she's really tight with money. And for anybody who's been maybe in her positions can kind of relate to this. And then, but she does have her wants, right? She likes to go out, eat with her friends. So she's budgeting $50 a month for restaurants. And again, that really won't get you that far. That may get you 1 to 2 dinners. And so as you can tell, this is a very limited budget. But again, this is just to kind of show you what this may look like for somebody. For entertainment, whatever that may be, $40 a month. That may be some subscription service, some music services. And this is her entertainment. And then clothing, $100 a month. So you see the want item being the highest in this category as clothing. And so what you see at the bottom of each of these categories is the total sum. So for example, the needs, you have 1,220, and for the wants, it's 210. If we add that really quick, that's 1,430. If we do 2,000 minus 1,430, that's 570. So you can see how quickly money can really, go towards some of these areas, and before you even actually get your check. This is some of the concepts behind budgeting. And the reason why we want to start practicing budgeting on a monthly scale is so you understand what financial position you'll be at the end of the month and how much flexibility you have. As an example, if you had a sudden opportunity to go on a trip, you have the means to do so. So that way you can at least make smart financial decisions that can improve your financial well-being. You see a debts category there. She has her credit card at $200 a month and her student loan at $100 a month with a total debt schedule of $300 a month. So this is quite a lot, right? She has a $200 credit card bill at the end of the month. That means that we can make some assumptions here that she engages in her credit card quite often. If you remember to our past conversation, I briefly touched upon this subject here. Most folks are meeting their needs through credit. And this is something that we have seen at our financial institution and just in the general financial industry. And so some of the strategies that we'll be covering today are debt repayment strategies. And so how you can start tackling some of these debts. So Marta is in the financial position where she can save a monthly. So she chooses to save $100 a month. Is that the best move? We see the credit cards, the student loan debt. Is she better off maybe paying off these loans or these credit cards as opposed to saving? Again, I think it really depends on your own personal financial position and your opinion. I think that savings, no matter the amount, has such positive implications that I would recommend to save over paying down quickly, because at the same time, it does allow you to maybe build a rainy day fund. As a quick example, one of the budgeting concepts, I don't have a slide for it here, but I'll just give this to you as a tidbit. Most folks want to prepare up to 3 months worth of expenses. And that's just to cover that's just a normal rainy day fund. That's not including funds for, car expenses, future car expenses, etc. A 3-month essentially budget, and you prepare that in a savings, as far as, trying to get your savings built to last 3 months if you were to happen to lose a job or be in a tight situation. That's where you kind of want to aim for. If you don't already have the savings, that's something to aim for. So again, going back to short-term goals, what is a short-term goal that I can achieve? Remember, a short-term goal can be achieved in a few months or up to 2 years. So maybe a short-term goal for those who may not have a 3-month rainy day fund is maybe that's where to start. So what are some of the strategies to start getting there? Well, we covered the 5-step plans and how to build a budget. And really, it takes a little bit of patience and time. And again, you don't have to do this alone. I always recommend to go back to your financial institution, seek out a credit union. Resources are available to you to help you kind of manage these conversations. And honestly, they may make it so easy for you and give you a financial plan at little to no cost. So I really want to talk about this 50-30-20 rule. I briefly brought it up in our previous conversation, but I have a quick visual here. So the 50-30-20 rule is just a budgeting concept that you can apply to yourself to better understand how your financial health is. So again, the 50% means that there's no more than 50% of your income on needs. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to go to a slide back and let's use Marta as an example. So let's look at Marta's needs. Her needs are at a total of 1,220. Marta's monthly income is 2,000. If we take 50% of Marta's monthly income of 2,000, that gives us $1,000 figure. So technically, Marta isn't following the 50-30-20 rule. Again, this is no more than a budgeting concept to kind of help you assess your financial health. So if Marta's closer to 65% of her needs is 65% of her income is in her needs category, that's okay. Again, this is just a benchmark to help you understand how you're doing and where you are. By no means do you have to follow this rule, but I think it does give you a good place of reflection to see how well you're doing with your finances. Moving on to the 30%. It says no more than 30% of income on wants. And so let's go back to Marta. Her wants are at 210 and her monthly income is at 2,000. If we do some quick math, 210 divided by 2,000, I don't know the figure on top of my head, but I do know it's below 30%. So Marta is doing better in this area as far as the 50-30-20 rule is concerned. So again, each budget is going to look different based on your own financial profile. And going back to your question as far as why it's taboo, it's because everybody's financial profile is so different that somehow they feel that they're worse off or better off. And so it really makes individuals uncomfortable knowing that maybe somebody else is in a better financial position. But the reality is that it's all context, and this is all individual or family unit journeys. You shouldn't compare your finances to somebody else. You shouldn't compare yourselves in general to somebody else. It's just not a good thing to do. And so when it comes to finances, I encourage you to be open with trusted individuals, with your financial institution, so they can assess the proper needs that you have and deliver on the services or products that you actually need. Going back to the 50-30-20 rule, I want to talk about the 20% aspect of it, which is 20% of income on savings and or debt repayment. So again, some folks are not in the position to save, and some folks are. And so that's okay. But again, I think that the important piece here again, and I know I sound like a broken record player here, but it's the habit of saving. I can't stress that enough. I highly encourage you, whether it's whatever's financially responsible to your budget, I highly recommend it. But let's look back at Marta. So again, at least 20% of income on savings and or debt repayment. Oops, excuse me. So she has $300 in debt that she pays monthly, and then $100. So we total that to $400. We divide 400 by 2,000. That's about where the figure gets us. So remember, the 50-30-20 rule is nothing more than just a guide. This is just to help you understand your finances in a larger context. By no means do you have to follow this to the T. But it does give you at least that point of reflection to assess your financial health and saying, hey, do I have spending issues? Do I need to start thinking about, income? Is my income satisfying what I need to be? Do I need to maybe look for a different job? Do I need to pursue higher education? What avenues and strategies do I have in place to increase my financial freedoms and financial well-being? And that really what the concept behind the 50-30-20 rule is, again, just to kind of provide that backing for you to understand your finances a little bit better.
I have a question about that, Alfredo, and I'm sorry. We live in California, and in California, everything's going up. We're seeing gas prices nearing $5 in some locations. Does the 50-30-20 rule still apply when, yeah, we may be able to go get a better job that pays more, or we may go and seek higher education so that we get that bump in salary because of an extra degree that we have? But does it still help when inflation and the cost of living and everything continues to rise at the exact same time?
That's a really great question, and to be quite honest with you, I don't really have a good answer for it. Let's look back at Marta's budget here. I did call out her rent was at $600, which here in Ventura County, where can you find somewhere to live for this amount of money, right? I think that we're in an incredible tough time. And what you're actually speaking on, Daniel, is a larger debate on financial wellness and financial education. I have seen people with opposing views when it comes to financial workshops, as an example. They say something along the lines like, well, you really can't help us because the way that the world is going right now, the way that the local economy is operating. My whole perspective is that I hope you take something away from this. I know that I don't have all the answers to provide for you, but the idea is that if we can become better financial thinkers, and if that's one or two pieces that you get through my presentation today, I hope that you have at least that. And so to your question, is a 50-30-20 rule a budgeting concept to follow in volatile times in a volatile economy, in the way that prices are rising? No, you have to adjust based on your environment. And if your environment is dictating the terms of your finances, that's incredibly challenging. Um, there's not an easy way out of that, right? That's why we have a huge migration of California individuals heading to other states, just because it's not financially feasible in their current environment to do the things that they want to do in their lives. And so I think that your question speaks to a larger issue, but I'll stay away from that.
Yeah, I've never been the one to not go for the larger issue question. So um, I guess that's a debate for another time and another group of people.
Thank you, Daniel. Great. So to your question earlier about, or actually, sorry, this is another method that folks use to budget their funds. And so if you didn't quite like the 50-30-20 rule, this is a little bit more technical breakdown. And again, I understand that the 30% for housing may not make sense currently where we are. But again, this just provides a reflection point for yourself so you understand how some folks are operating their budgets. So the categories method is a completely detailed breakdown and percentages of categories. So usually people who follow this method are folks who really like to understand where each penny goes, essentially. So these are your savvy individuals who really enjoy budgeting, who like to do this and really understand over a longer period of time how their money is operating. So as you see here, we have essentially a total of 100%, with 30% being the highest, and this is going to go towards housing. 10% for utilities, 10% for groceries, transportation, debt repayment, which includes credit cards, student loans, and then 10% for savings. And then you have more of your want section here. So 5% for dining out, 5% for car insurance, auto expenses, clothing, and entertainment. And so this is just a different method that some folks use. By no means is this the best way or the preferred way, but I like to introduce at least two types of methods, both in the budgeting perspective and the debt repayment, just to kind of give you a little taste and flavor as to what some folks are doing out there. So if you're looking at this information and saying, hey, maybe I want to try the categories method, use this as a benchmark. You know, one way you can quickly do this is by taking that figure, your net income off of your monthly check, and you want to essentially your net income for the entire month and multiply that by your housing expense. Is it at 30%? Probably not. It's probably closer to 50-60% here in Ventura County. But again, this kind of gives you a working understanding of some of these concepts. And so although you may not be in a financial position to maybe follow this, but it does give you at least that understanding and financial practice. So that way you can understand your essentially your expenses, your consumer decisions at a higher level, ultimately leading you to make better decisions overall when it comes to financial practices. So categories method may work for you, not necessarily for everybody, but again, just a different method that you can start doing today. So great, strategies for paying off debt. I think that this is where I have the most fun as far as talking about budgeting. I think that a lot of folks out there really appreciate this. And so what I have provided today are two commonly accepted strategies for paying off for debt. We're going to cover the ladder method and the snowball method. And so to your question earlier, Daniel, you know, how do we tackle our debt? Is it better to save? Is it better to add more to the monthly minimum payment? Well, I think it's all on perspective and relative to the type of interest you're paying on your loans. So let's quickly talk about these strategies. So by following the ladder method, you minimize the amount of interest paid because the interest rate determines how quickly your debt will grow and how much more you will have to pay each month. So long story short, the ladder method essentially says, hey, I'm going to go ahead and tackle the highest interest rate. Let's put a perspective out there. Let's say that you have 3 credit cards, Daniel. One credit card has a rate of 29%, another one has 15, and then the last one has a 10%. So we have a 29, a 15, and a 10%, essentially 3 credit lines. Let's say that they all have, for the sake of simplicity, they all have the same balance of $1,000. If you were to follow the latter method, you're gonna pay off the highest interest rate first. Why is that the case? Simply because your debt will grow a lot more quickly at that higher rate at the balance of 1,000. So you want to essentially be proactive in eliminating the potential growing of that debt. Let's change it up a little bit. Let's say that 29% credit card really has a $500 balance, and then the 15 and the 10 continue to have the $1,000 balance. Does it make financial sense for you to pay the highest interest rate card, even though if it's the smallest balance? And this is where the snowball method comes in. The snowball method says it's a debt reduction strategy where you pay off debt in order smallest to largest, gaining momentum as you knock off of each balance. I will say that most folks like the snowball method more because you do get that good feeling of paying off that debt. There is that immediate gratification and satisfaction of paying off a balance. So how does the snowball method work? Well, just like its name, it's all about building momentum. So going back to my example, you have 3 credit cards, a 29%, a 15, and a 10. For the sake of this conversation, let's put them back all at $1,000 balance. Well, I'm sorry, let's put the 29% at the $500 balance I had mentioned. So although it's the highest rate, and even if the rate was smaller, you would still want to pay the smallest balance first. The reason being is that you can actually pay that off quicker, which will free up that monthly payment and allow you to tackle another debt, as an example. On top of that, you get the positive feeling of paying down a balance that you no longer have to worry about. So, you heard me say this, the ladder method and the snowball method. I think when you're choosing which method to engage in, really depends on your personal preference. Do you have the means to tackle the smallest debt first? Or do you have an out of control credit card with a high interest rate that is just continuing to rack up essentially a balance? These are some of the decisions that you're going to have to make based on your own personal financial profile. If you happen to be in a position where you just have 2 credit cards and they have relatively similar balance, then, then maybe go with the highest rate. Tackle the highest rate if it's at the same balance. If you have a discrepancy between balances on credit cards and the smaller one looks more achievable and it can be managed in a short amount of time, I would say tackle the smallest one first. So then that frees up that monthly payment and it goes back, and then you can go back and tackle another credit card. So these are just 2 methods that you can use today as far as paying off debt. I'd like to ask you, Daniel, have you used either of these methods, or what's your methodology in choosing what debt to pay off, either more or quicker?
So it's funny because my wife and I, we always have this debate. She believes that we should focus on one item at a time, whether it's our credit cards or our car loans. And I believe, if I have an extra 1,000, why not just increase the monthly payments? Because sometimes the monthly payments, they vary. One monthly payment may be, I'm just going to throw a random number out, $40. But another one is 110. So my whole mindset about it is, well, even if I pay off that small amount, $40, that's not really going to make a difference towards the other ones. So I just like to kind of like keep them all low and just pay more to each one. Whereas my wife, she's like, it's better if we just knock one off at the time so we don't have to worry about it. So that's why I asked the question, because it is a debate that goes on. And as you mentioned, it's a hot topic. Everybody wants to know which method is actually the right one. As to tackling debt and paying it back, but still having a sense of accomplishment.
That's a great segue, Daniel. I mean, a great response as well. A lot of folks struggle with this. They struggle, which debt should I tackle? If you're in the position where you have, a remaining balance at the end of the month on your budget, and you're saying, hey, I want to make an active decision to pay down debt, great. That means you're in great financial position. So now it's really about utilizing your dollars in the best way possible. And I think this kind of lends itself to the conversation you had with your wife. So if you look at your debts, Daniel, and you're saying, hey, I have extra money, look at the balances and look at the interest rate. Put those together. Is this balance with this interest rate, growing at a rate that's faster than maybe another debt? And if so, am I better off trying to pay this one down quicker? So that way I don't actually pay more into this over a longer period of time. You would be following the latter method in that case. Or if you have, pesky credit cards with 150 here, 200 there, 500 there, um, would it make you feel better or the family unit feel better if we tackle these smaller ones and just get them off our plate and kind of build momentum to tackle the big mountain per se, the big credit card that we have? That's a conversation that you'll have and any individual will have with their family unit or within yourself as you make these decisions. But the point is that you want to utilize your dollars that makes the most financial sense. And so if you are in a position to, pay a little bit more, be methodical in how you do that with your debts. And either way, it's a win-win because you're paying down your debts. Usually this means that you're in a financial position where you have a savings. And so if you're in a position where you have extra money at the end of the month and you don't really have a savings, I would recommend that you figure out what a healthy savings amount per month looks like. And then even then, if you have remaining amounts of funds, then maybe battle between these two methods and see which works best for you or the family unit.
Now, just to confirm, it is not recommended or ideal to go after the largest amount and pay the most towards that, right? It is better to try to go after one of the smaller ones first. Because essentially, if you try to go after the larger ones, you're kind of just, I don't want to say throw your money away because you're paying it, as you mentioned, that's good. There's no wrong way of approaching that. But is it going to allow your dollar to go further going after that larger one versus a smaller one?
So a great question. No, to your question, you may. So the idea behind your question really is that if you are tackling a higher rate credit card or a higher balance, the idea here is that if the minimum payment is satisfied for $50 as an example, but your balance is upwards to $1,000, that $50 is going to be negligible into, even if you were at another $30 to that, make it a total payment of $80. You're right. Next month, that balance is going to accrue interest. And so you're essentially making a very small dent in that line of credit. So if you're in the financial position where you do have, several credit cards and one, that one that I'm talking about, the one that's like, wow, we got to work on that one. I would encourage the snowball method. You'll feel better at the end of the day knowing that you knock one off and then another. And then what you can do is apply that monthly payment towards the big one. And so again, the whole idea behind the snowball method is that you build momentum in essentially knocking off from smallest to largest. And this is what most consumers do, actually. Most consumers like the snowball method just because it does give you that positive feeling. And then the dollar does extend further, to your point.
Awesome.
Great questions, Daniel. So in a nutshell, what we talked about today was really how to explore these pieces of a budget. And I hope that these 5 steps really kind of put it in perspective to you. While I have a quick few more minutes, I'd like to show one thing really quick, Daniel, if that's okay.
Yeah, please go ahead.
So this is something that can actually be found on our website. If you were to go to cbcsu.org, we have this presentation available to you as well as the document that I'm about to show you. And this is something that we prepared for Oxnard College as well. So let me share this Excel workbook. So this Excel workbook is something that we provided to Oxnard College students and essentially anybody who visits our website. So this is just a basic foundational understanding of budgets. The nice thing about this document is that it's embedded with formulas to kind of help you understand some of these pieces. So what you're going to see is some of these pieces move based on the formulas that we embedded. If you don't happen to have Excel, this is open source, meaning that you can upload this to Google Sheets. And so Google Sheets is free. And so you can ultimately access this if you don't have Excel on Google Sheets, and everything transposes just as fine. So what we have here is a fillable, essentially, workbook. So if you know your rent is, example, $1,500 a month, some of these figures are going to start working. As you see down here, the total of your expenses are down here, and then you see the income, which is 5,000 minus 1,500, gives you a disposable income of 35. So you have categories like your needs, your debts, your wants, and in this area here, allows you essentially to check your budget if you can save the amount that you'd like to save. So after you fill this all out, essentially come back to the savings contribution and put, something you'd like to save for the month. And then down here at the bottom, it's going to tell you if it works or not. So for the sake of today, I'm just going to make it quick and easy. Let's say your coffee, for whatever reason, is 2,000, just for the sake of conversation. It doesn't even like that. Like, that's way too much is what it's saying here. But the idea is that this all speaks to itself, and it tells you how much money you have at the end of the month. Let's say that, you went crazy on restaurants for that month, and then for whatever reason, Netflix hiked their prices. Sorry, I was going to do 350 there. Excuse me. So see how it shows it in red in parentheses. This gives you an immediate understanding if you're operating essentially a deficit in your budget. So at minimum, if any of this seem well to you, you can always go back to our website and access this document to kind of help you and encourage you to start building a budget. And you play around with this, really. This is there for you, and it's at no cost. This is completely free on our website. And this is part of the commitment, the credit union commitment that we give to our community in providing, actionable steps that you can take to improve your financial well-being. So I just wanted to share that with you. I thank you for your time. I know we're approached the 5 o'clock mark here. I really do appreciate the time you took today, Daniel, to have this conversation.
No, absolutely. And I appreciate you sharing all of this useful information, because it's definitely could spark an interest in somebody to finally get on that path that probably been asking themselves, where do I even start? And I believe today's conversation really helped. But before we wrap up, can you maybe jump to the CBC website and kind of walk through the steps as to how to reach that document for our viewers so that they know how to get that document?
Absolutely. Let's do that right now.
I'm sure my wife is watching and she's going to want to play around with that document and see how that goes. So it'd be good to see.
Absolutely. And it's so much fun because the formulas are embedded in there. And so it just makes it that much more easier. So this is our website. The website is cbcfcu.org. You type that in, or you type that into Google, you'll hit our main page here. And just as a quick plug, we just got a new website, so I hope you enjoy it. But long story short, so once you hit our website, you come to the learning section. You have our upcoming events, you have our financial sense, and then our learning library. So before I jump into the learning library, which you'll find this material in, I really want to just share with you what we have with you. So if you wanted to explore topics, not necessarily just in budgeting, but a wide variety of financial topics. Bear with me here, my computer's slow a little bit, but we have tons of essentially short tidbits videos here that show you a wide variety of topics: buying a home, closing escrow, knowing before you owe, calculating your credit score, loans, certificates of deposits, co-signing loans, credit scoring, so forth and so on. And so all these resources are completely free. You don't have to be a member. So you could literally work on your financial game by exploring any of the many topics that we have here. So I encourage everybody here that's tuning in today, if you'd like to learn a little bit more about Roth IRAs, stocks and bonds, understanding collateral, using credit wisely, this is all available to you at no cost. But to your question, Daniel, where do I find this information? You're going to find our learning library, and this learning library are very similar to what you and I did today. We have different videos, different webinars that you can actually find some of this information in. So some of these things are like 4 myths, credit and credit cards. But to your question, where do I find this? It's right here in this budgeting basics area here. So what you're going to actually see here is my presentation here on YouTube on budgeting the basics, very similar to what we hosted today. We do dive deeper into the information as far as some of the aspects of tonight's conversation. And this is where you're going to find this in here. So let me see where we can find it. You're going to have to excuse me. I believe it was up here, but we just remodeled our website. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is take this back to my team, and you should see this relatively open, but feel free. I'm going to drop my information. As a matter of fact, let me do this. But before I get out of here, let me just share one more thing with you. So we come back to the Learning Library. For any of our Spanish speakers, you go to here in Espanol, you're going to see a lot of these resources in Espanol before. And so you're going to see some of these informations here for any of our Spanish speakers. But let me just take a quick second to share this. What I can do for you now, I thought it was up there, excuse me for that. But what I can do for you is if you happen to have some time, feel free to email me. I'm gonna leave this here for about 30 seconds, and then I can get the document to anybody who would like to reach out to me. There's my email, alfredo.martinez@cbcfcu.org. You have my word, Danielle. Commit to posting it on there. I'm hoping before the end of the week. So give me that much time and you'll see the actual document up there. But in the meantime, if you'd like to start working on this now, shoot me an email. I can send you the document. I have it available. It is open source and happy to help facilitate any kind of questions anybody has.
Awesome, Alfredo. Again, I appreciate the conversation and I appreciate you sharing all of these resources, CBC sharing their resources, their knowledge with the community. It's a great community partnership to be able to have our financial institutions be that safe net and information hub when we have those financial questions. Ladies and gentlemen, again, this is Alfredo Martinez from CBC Federal Credit Union. Visit the website at cbcfcu.org. As you just heard him say multiple times, they just revamped their website, so you can go ahead and explore, check out their learning lab and library so that you're able to check out those videos and those burning questions that you have. Contact them, contact Alfredo, alfredo.martinez@cbcfcu.org. And it's all a huge benefit. Alfredo, any final words as we wrap up tonight?
Thank you, Daniel, for the opportunity. Thank you, Oxnard Live. I hope that this conversation inspires folks out there to take the next step in their financial planning, or even just their next step in having a conversation with their financial institution. At the end of the day, we're here to serve you. We're here to help you, whether it's our credit union or your financial institution. So be confident and push back and ask for the resources. Happy to give them to you. And again, thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Alfredo. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, this is Oxnard Live. Beginning next week, Wednesday, September 15th, Oxnard Live. This show will be every first and third Wednesday of the month. It will be airing at 6 p.m. And the return of Oxnard and Espanol. Yesterday was supposed to be the return every second Wednesday, but we had some technical issues. But we're going to be airing tonight at 6 p.m. And Alfredo is actually going to be the first guest on Oxnard Espanol's return back to Oxnard Live. So you'll be able to hear him speak again. It's not going to be a presentation like this. It's going to be a general conversation about finances, but it's all in Spanish. So if you have friends or family that would benefit from listening to this, please be sure to visit our website, oxnardlive.net, visit our social media pages at Oxnard Live, and be sure to follow along. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Oxnard Live. I'm your host, Daniel Chavez Jr. Again, be sure to join us next week, Wednesday, as we start our first and third Wednesday at 6 p.m. right here. Our guests, well, your guess is as good as mine, so we'll find out who our guest is going to be. So right here, 6 p.m., Oxnard Live with me, Daniel Chavez Jr. Thank you again, Alfredo. Have a great night, everyone. And this is Oxnard Live, all live and 100%